In the past, I've referenced Hermetic principles. I've referenced the first Hermetic principle of mentalism. And when you look at that, the all is mind. The universe is mental. And you realize that the powers that be on this planet and the people who pull the strings have been studying this stuff and understand the human psychology at such deep levels that this is how they have been working on humans for a very long time, working on our minds. I mean, they've been pitting us against each other with wars and all that other stuff on top of that. But the biggest assault that humanity has ever experienced has been on our minds. Now, these attacks can come from forces from beyond this world, and that can be quantified for even a Christian who believes in God and the devil, you know, and the workers of the devil and all those people who will work on your mind, you know, to taint your mind. It's the devil's work. You know, there are forces beyond this world that work on our minds. I have spoken of this multiple times. And then there are forces on this planet that are working on our minds. To the degree in which you understand how this system works, how the world works, who's in control of the world, what they're in control of, how they use what they're in control of to influence and on some levels absolutely manipulate the minds of people. To the degree in which you understand that, will much of this make sense to you or not make sense? They use this as a weapon, the media, the television, the movies, Hollywood, even music and porn. They use this as a weapon in ways that most people don't even perceive as such, because they don't recognize, because it's been so all-pervasive throughout all of their lives, they don't even recognize it as an all-out assault on the mind. Maybe some people get bits and pieces of it and glimpses of it, and you know, I know people who are profoundly asleep that are just beyond themselves when it comes to, beside themselves when it comes to sitting through watching commercials, but by and large, the mind is the root of perception. The powers that be understand this. They use all the tools at their disposal to influence your mind. Things like the book Propaganda talks about the first page, you know, how your reality is crafted. These are people who understand how to influence the mind on levels that most people can't comprehend, because most people go through life, go to high school, maybe go to college. They're always worried about just getting a job. They have families. They get up, go to work, pay their bills, pay their taxes, and they don't really think about much of this stuff. They go to the bar, they go to the softball field, the football field, they go to this, they go to that, they have their, you know, life, and they're just caught on that cycle. So they don't pay attention. They don't lift their head up and look around at what's going on. And on top of the fact that they're so profoundly indoctrinated by the system and all of the mechanisms that are there to condition your mind, knowing how easily, once that's done, your ass will follow. And then you will begin to train your offspring in a similar way and begin to instill in them the values that have been instilled in you by the mechanisms that are here, designed to influence what you think, what you believe, your perceptions of reality, and the whole thing. With the perception being kind of the root of the human experience, you'd think that we'd be able to guard against that a little bit better. You'd think maybe we'd have some sort of an innate mechanism of protection, but we don't. And when you can influence that perception, manipulate that perception, and cause all kinds of things like fears and traumas and all kinds of crap, make men murder each other and do all kinds of ridiculous shit. That, well, traumas cover the gamut. Mental, emotional, physical, sexual. If you go to war, you get traumatized. You do traumatic shit. You see traumatic shit. There's just lots of ways you get traumatized through natural disasters and, you know, all kinds of things that cause traumas that psychologically impact the human. And there's not a whole lot we can do, obviously, about natural disasters and the way that traumas are incurred in that respect. But when you look at all of the other ways that these things happen, that damage the mind, that affect the perception, that twist the perception, that pervert the mind, it's amazing. There has been an all-out barrage on influencing how we perceive reality. When you look at the grander picture and you begin to see that all of what we've been fed for so long has been rooted in, and I'm talking movies, TV, all of it in the modern world for a couple of generations now, has been violence, freaking cowboy movies all the way back in the early days, killing each other, killing Indians, blah, blah, violence, war movies, John Wayne and all these other people, war heroes, all the way back in the day. And on and on and on and on. We're glorifying murder and killing and death and destruction and all of the things. And it's perverting the mind. It's perverting the perception. It's instilling false ideas that are being taken into the mind by way of the eyes and the ears through watching this mechanism known as TV, that men that you're not aware of, that want to control what you think and believe and how you perceive the world, have taken great pains to craft the story, to weave the themes through the stories, whether it's a TV show or a cartoon show, a kid's show, a Hollywood movie, a Disney movie, a song. It's just, plus the perversion of the mind with regards to sex by way of porn, and the perversion of the mind by way of money, and how men have done ridiculous things for pieces of paper and or money. These are all based off of perceptions. These are all based off of perversions of perception, meaning when you're willing to do all the horrible shit. All of this is going on in the mind. And this entire experience, whether it's the spiritual battle, working on our minds, or existing in the USA or any other country in the world, in today's world, all the fear, terrorism, fear of war or economic problems, economic collapse, blah, 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 fear of terrorism acts and at home, fear of mass shootings, fear of this, fear of that. If you have an eye for this stuff, if you have an awareness of these things, if you understand why they're doing what they're doing to program you into a fear-based state, to paralyze you psychologically, to make you impotent, to infiltrate your mind with their ideas, their perceptions of their ideas of and what they want you to believe. Now, when you look at the whole of that as predominantly disempowering, whether it's religion and what it wants us to believe, it ultimately drives us to our knees. When you look at government and what it wants us to believe, that ultimately, metaphorically, drives us to our knees in obedience to their authority. Seriously. And look at the perversion that is, because the people are the government. The power resides in the people. Yet, look at the world that we live in. Everything has been twisted upside down and perverting our minds and thereby our perceptions. And our perceptions are at the root of our experience of life, our interpretation of what this thing is. Think about that for a second. And perceptions are largely based off of past programming and past experience as well. But this is how they work on us. They can't necessarily come into America, and this is just one example, and kill everybody or take all the guns or all that stuff. That's why we haven't experienced that happen so far. Because of that, they can't do largely what they would want to do by force. So they use the next best thing, which turns out to be the most awesome weapon ever wielded against us anyway, and that's work on our minds. When you start looking at the fact that most of us don't have any awareness of this, and we don't have any inherent defense mechanisms to protect the perception, that we don't have any direct access into the subconscious mind to modify the things that are in there that help to influence the perception. When we realize and rise to a level of awareness that there are things in there that cause X, Y, or Z, or that are toxic or don't serve us or whatever, there's all of these equations in us that I've pointed out before that allow for easy manipulation of the human being that generally translates, or almost always translates, into pain and suffering and control of the human, imposed on the human, ergo suffering. It could be any variation of how that stuff is implemented or imposed, all the way up to death and torture, lack, famine, economic woes, whatever it could potentially be. It is amazing how so much of what we experience really ultimately impacts our minds. And when you look at the level of effort that's exerted to control our minds, to influence our minds, to instill fear-based stuff, to put everybody in a low fear-based state, I'm telling you people, I believe this in the core of my being, that it lends itself to the fact that they've been guiding and swaying us into this fear-based state, this war-like state, this murderous-like state that we are as a species, and all the other negative shit. The divided state, the fearful state, the terroristic threat, all of that stuff. And to have us emitting the most negative energy that they can get out of the masses, does that make sense? And then that essentially feeds these beings, this whatever the hell this force of beings is, the archons, the energy feeders, the ones that feed on that negative energy. And I believe the reasons why the people that control the porn industry is because they're serving the same masters. And well, the energy of perverse sexual energy feeds them as well. Perverse sexual energy feeds them in a way that's like dessert to them, where our negative energy is more like main sustenance. And yeah, that's why sex is being perverted in the way it has been for however many generations, with pornography and the things that we've been seeing, even all the way down to the perversion in today's world with the perversion of what gender is and the confusion of the mind there. There's a perfect example of how the powers that be are working on the perception of everybody. You start looking at the way that they're working in this confusion about gender and gender neutral and plural and they, them, plurals and blah, blah. It's like, are you kidding me? They're working on our minds and overtime. And also, here's another thing. When you're working with magic, high order magic, and at the higher levels of what's going on this planet, they absolutely do rituals, ceremonies, seance, spells, etc., etc. Magic has the effect of in many respects, it can affect the mind. It can put you to sleep. It can put you in pain. There's just so many things that magic can do to affect the mind, to put a veil over your eyes, to stifle your perception, because it's easy. It's not guarded. It's not protected. It's like, I don't know, our minds are as open and vulnerable as a frickin' turtle without a shell, for crying out loud. That was by design. I mean, I know I keep going off about this stuff, but it's just, it's going around in my head, not over and over uncontrollably. It's just, and pieces are locking in, and I'm beginning to see, I don't know how many people understand this. I don't know how many people understand the things that I do to be able to put this stuff together, or if they don't, they hear me and this resonates with them and it makes sense. From where I sit, there's not too many other plausible explanations about how and why the minds of man have been worked on to be perverted in the way that they have. I mean, and to control us the way they have and instill fear and all that other stuff. Again, if I can control or influence your mind, your ass is ultimately going to follow. I think one of the points that I forgot when I was talking about is that's how we have so many people in this country who are armed and aren't willing to do anything as an example, because their minds are conditioned. Plus, we've been getting hit chemically on levels that are just hard to describe to people who are unaware of it, and will think that that's all just conspiracy talk. Part of the conditioning and the influencing of the mind is all around us with the people who are ignorant to these things, and you tell them about fluoride and they think it's good for your teeth. You tell them about GMOs, they think that's man doing something good for the food chain. You tell them about some of the horrible, chemtrails, and they just think it's contrails. You tell them about all of the things that are going on, and they just don't have the awareness of it. So to go into how this whole mechanism and this whole construct is working on their mind, they just generally don't get it. I mean, these are generally people that still watch the news and, spend their evenings at home in front of the TV. That is unfortunately a sad reality for most people, even the ones that claim to be awake. And I don't fully get that. I think they're more claiming to be awake, and because it sounds good, and there's a community of people that I don't know, because I don't think you can actually claim to be an awakened being and sit in front of the TV most evenings and just watch TV. No matter what you tell yourself about the storyline, the themes, oh, it's not violent, oh, it's nature, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, it doesn't make a difference. That mechanism of entertainment, television and all of the networks and the shows, even if there's a few decent ones in there, you can't risk it. You really can't. And you'd be better suited feeding your mind and learning to guard your mind than sitting there being entertained by some trivial television show. I get every once in a while just wanting to disconnect from everything, sit back and veg and maybe watch a movie or a show or a series that, for whatever reason you like. But for the most part, and I'm talking to the 98th percentile, folks, sitting there watching that thing is a perfect sign of the fact that people are still not quite aware enough to know what that mechanism is doing to their minds. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but because it so dramatically affects the mind, what you perceive, the fact that the theta state is induced by the flicker rate of the actual television screen itself, it's amazing. And then when the brain gets into that, the mind gets into that theta state, it's susceptible to subliminal programming. It's easily influenced. If you've ever seen your children or somebody else's children kind of with their head cocked in a daze, maybe drooling on themselves, I'm kidding there, but watching TV and their parents were calling their name and they couldn't be, their attention was not gotten by mom and dad saying, hey, 4 or 5 times, until mom or dad smacked the couch or, their hands together or something like that to snap the kid out of the trance is the point. Because it literally induces that type of hypnotic trance-like state. Think about that, people. Become more aware of the reality of how they're getting into your mind, the tools, the mechanisms, all the way down to the nuts and bolts, i.e. the flicker rate. And it tunes the mind to a way that you can be subliminally programmed. I mean, when you're absolutely consciously aware of it, I'm going to assume that it's a lot less likely, but it takes time to really get the eyes to see, the ears to hear how it all works. And I can't even watch TV anymore. I really can't. So anyway, this was to express and share with you the ideas about the mind, how much they're working on it and why. And you combine what I'm saying here with what I just said, for instance, in my other recent videos about how the mind is affected by so many people's minds are affected by the varying ways in which the child is traumatized. And this world, excuse me for putting it this way, this is a sick fucking world. And there's a lot of evil, sick fucking people that really do sick, horrible shit to kids of varying ages, all the way up to the point where they can start defending themselves, I suppose, is when that shit stops. If, their minds aren't completely turned at that point. But whether it's families that abuse kids, for whatever reason. And there's a menagerie of reasons. And anybody that listens to my voice knows what I'm talking about, maybe has their own story, has friends that have stories of the fucked up parents, the fucked up uncle who did whatever it is they may have done. Criminal pieces of shit, drug addicts, molesters, or whatever. Everybody's got some kind of generally black sheep in their family that, or has experienced that or been touched by that. So you know what I'm saying. How does this stuff happen? Well, when these people are influencing the children that they're raising, it traumatizes their minds, and that cycle perpetuates itself. So we have, fucked up people who are traumatized, doing what they did, repeating the cycle, creating that in their kids. And until somebody along that chain has the awareness to stop that cycle, these are just generation after generation continually perpetuating profound traumas into the psyche of the human at young ages when we're still developing, inducing negative states of being to such a large degree for so many people that deal with psychological problems for the remainder of their life, maybe don't deal with life well, or whatever variation or manifestation these things may come out. And all of this is just simply as a byproduct of what the fuck the human experiences as a child, by their family, by their teachers, by their government, by cops, by clergy, by any of these things. And this is all before we get out into the world. We're supposed to be balanced beings that hit the world knowing how to fucking do everything. And most of the people hit the world knowing how to get up, go to work, pay your bills, pay your taxes, get a job, and be a good little slave. And because they can get some money, they can buy a house, they can buy a car, they think that that's life, that's achieving something. And beyond that, it's just amassing more money. And I'm just thinking to myself, this really is the world I live in. Excuse me. This really is the world I live in. And most people are so profoundly unaware of this, obscenely oblivious to this kind of stuff, grotesquely unaware. We don't have the innate protection mechanisms to protect ourselves, to guard ourselves from these kinds of attacks. We don't have very much these default mechanisms that get us back to center when the human psyche has been traumatized. It matters so much because the center of the human is the mind. And it lends itself to the fact that we were designed in such a way that because we were emotional beings, psychological beings, there's fragility there. You traumatize the human too much, it really fucks them up, stunts them in a negative place. You start inducing that into an entire species. And as they continue to traumatize themselves, this negative space and place continues to be here. This negative energy continues to exude out of them. And there are so many forces and mechanisms at work by which the human, which is a psychological, mind-based being, is continuously traumatized in negative ways to induce these negative states. I mean, fuck, it's traumatizing for a child to lose his mother. I know that firsthand, well, not from my own experience, but I know people who have lost their mother at young ages that have been profoundly affected by these types of things. Simply having your parents divorce can and does profoundly destroy and affect the psyche of some kids. And abuses and losing parents to war and death and people whose parents are killed by cops and just all of these fucking ways that the human can be psychologically damaged, traumatized, influenced, manipulated. It's like, yet we don't have this innate mechanism to get back to center and recover from the traumas that could knock you so far off center, from the traumas that shock you so fucking bad that you have to work to, there's nothing. I mean, animals shake it out, like I said, dogs and stuff, but obviously we're a different type of being and we have a whole different type of psychology, and I don't think shaking it out is really going to completely fit the bill, but it lends itself more and more. And the reason I'm doing these videos is because it's in alignment with what I've been said about being designed and created and put here to be a source of food. All of these things that point to how easy it is to absolutely fuck with and manipulate the human, the psychological, mind-based human. And because we're energy beings, because we emit energy, we are a source of food. When you start looking at the equations in how the world works, how we're designed, how easily we're manipulated, influenced, the lack of protections that we have against these things, the way the world's working on these things, Spirit's working on these things. I'm hard-pressed to figure out what real good thing we were here for. I mean, we obviously have good character traits. I think humans are innately good. We've been perverted. I think that if left alone, we would do great and wonderful things. I just really, and we have some interesting capabilities, and I think that may merely be a byproduct of the genetic code that we carry, that while it may be turned off, has the potential for us to be able to do far more greater things, and we see little bits and pieces of that manifest in people throughout history and even today. But it lends itself to being created to be slaves that were a source of food. We can manipulate the slaves, we can feed from them, they'll do our work, they'll do what we need them to do. They won't live long, so we won't have to worry about taking care of them because we're pretty fragile, so we break easy. All kinds of interesting stuff here. We were designed with very short lifespans, with all kinds of aspects of us that were shut off, firewalled off, turned off, or whatever. And then given religion to manipulate our minds, government to manipulate our minds. It's just like, I mean, seriously, I have been putting this stuff out and I have not found anybody, trolls or wise, intelligent people or anybody in between, to really refute some of these theories regarding these things. And maybe people, it resonates with them. But I would expect that if this was bullshit, if this was batshit fucking crazy, this guy needs to take his meds, or any kind of whatever shit people would say. People in a lot of cases make fun of and or degrade or all kinds of horrible shit that fucking humans do, especially from behind their goddamn keyboard on the internet. When they run into shit that defies their knowledge, that defies what they think they know, that challenges what they think they know. There's all kinds of weird shit, and I honestly have not received any of that. I'm not asking for it, but I find it interesting that that type of response, with regards to the types of things I'm talking about, hasn't found its way to me that much, or really at all, because I'm talking about the core of the human. I'm talking about the human experience. I'm talking about the equations that cause suffering. I'm talking about the equations that make it so we can't break out of the fucking prison. I'm talking about some things that, I tell you, if you've been looking at the picture and you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on, this shit should resonate with you. If you think I'm nuts, well, go on your own journey of exploration and come back and look this shit up in a year or two and see if I sound as crazy then, after you've taken some time to educate yourself, as you might think I sound now. But if you remain in the box, if you're unwilling to get out of the box, if you're unwilling to consider what else is possible, and if you're not absolutely curious to know the truth about the nature of this reality and who and what the hell we are, then you're never going to know, because you'll have to find that answer for yourself. If you're only content with what other people have told you, and the trivialities in life, and not using the intellect you were given, not seeking knowledge, not seeking wisdom, not seeking to grow, not seeking to expand your mind, your consciousness, your being, so that if you're not there, then this might not make sense to you. This might sound like I say before, batshit crazy. But I tell you, people, in the time that I've been looking for the answers, in the time that I've been seeking, in the experiences that I've had, this is all making so much sense to me, it's not funny. That's how I can just rattle all this stuff off in the past 29 minutes, almost 30 minutes. And honestly, I could probably go on with the varying ways that these equations and pieces of us are so easily manipulatable. We're designed to be manipulated. Once we're manipulated, we don't have an inherent mechanism to fix it. You manipulate the human too much, and it's almost an irreparable thing. If it is repairable, that human may have to work its entire freaking life or decades of its life to repair the damage that was done, especially if you do lots of damage to the human when it's very young. We have an epidemic of all kinds of fucked up people doing all kinds of fucked up things to young human beings, children, while they're developing, from it being families and schools and clergy and all that stuff. So we have generation after generation of people who are growing up in an environment where they think it's normal, these traumas. They end up doing it to their kids. Does anybody see how this fits together? Does anybody see how these cycles perpetuate themselves? Does anybody see how this points to how much we're even feeding the cycle that perpetuates all this negative energy that comes out of us, out of our own conditioning and ignorance to the fact of what it is that we're doing and how we're perpetuating negative cycles? We're damaging our offspring. We're damaging their minds so that they won't ever truly grow to be all that they could potentially be, because maybe they're going to spend their whole lifetime dealing with the psychological damage that was done to them through going to war when they were 18, 19 years old, or the psychological damage that was done to them through going to a extremely militant Catholic boarding school where the nuns or the priests were like horrible and abusive and whatever it is, or an incredibly abusive childhood where the mother or the father were grotesquely in the throes of alcoholism or drug addiction, or physical abuse or psychological abuse, or any of the things that fucked up parents who are absolutely oblivious to the damage that they do to the psyche of their own offspring, and live to regret it later when they see their kids turning out to be fucked up people. That seems to be the cycle. I think it's time that we start to be able to identify these cycles. What's at the root of them? What they're doing to us? How we are continuing to perpetuate a cycle that I can sit there and point to this external force of people that are pulling the strings on. We can point, we can't really necessarily control all that stuff. We don't necessarily have direct control over the outside beings, even if it's your belief that it's the devil, working on us. But what we do have is our contribution to what we're contributing to, in our personal experience. And if we're so fucking ignorant that we're contributing to the beginning stages of the traumatization of the human psyche, that fractures the human psyche, that causes such profound traumas that put the human into this negative state, that cause the fractures in the human psyche that may allow for these archonic external forces to begin to get into the mind, to induce things like psychosis, to induce things like depression, to induce things like any number of things, because these things can get into and have easy access to the frequency bands that our minds or psyches operate into. I mean, I'm telling you, people, this just makes too much goddamn sense. I may have some pieces wrong or not put together completely. There may be some pieces I'm missing, but I tell you, when I start looking at it, seriously, prove me wrong. There's a comment section. You can make a legitimate argument, be decent about it. You don't have to be an asshole because you disagree. You don't have to be a douchebag because you think it's totally fucking ridiculous what it is I'm saying. I'm talking about intellectual conversation about a topic that you may completely disagree with. Put forth why. Just put forth why. There's multiple pieces to a puzzle. Or multiple pieces to a pie. I'm bringing one slice. It fits. It has its place. If you profoundly disagree, or if you have a different perspective, bring your piece of the pie and share it so that we can all, those of us whose minds are spinning on these things, looking for answers, finding the pieces that fit at least on the plate in the puzzle of the 8 pieces or 12 pieces of pizza. Fuck, I don't know. Pizza's a good analogy because people understand how that makeup goes. Bring your piece. Have a rational, legitimate conversation, and I would find that stimulating. And then let those of us that have the mind to think of these things, that have the mind to seek for these answers, that have the mind to try to put together the pieces that we all find to find a bigger picture. I'll continuously say, I only see what it is that I see, and I've got a lot of pieces, and I see whatever picture it forms. But I know I don't have all the pieces. And there's other people out there that probably hear my voice that get pieces. So what I'm saying is, let's in some way take these pieces and begin to really put them together to better understand a more clear picture of what the fuck this thing is and why it is the way it is and what's going on. You never know. It could open up something where, well, that's a different topic. It could open up something in a very, very good way that connects these critically thinking minds into finding solutions, answers, ideas about the things that are really inducing so much of human suffering. I mean, at the default of the human desire and attachment, that's all part of the human individual experience. But there's so much other external forces that are inducing suffering that, God, if we all could just take part in eliminating that, the journey of life and suffering out of relationships or, attachment or desire is challenging enough in and of itself when you think about it. And then on top of that, all of the other things that induce suffering with the wars and the economic stuff and the famine and just all the stuff. Anyway, so this is a philosophizing mind dump that has gone, 36 and a half minutes almost. And it's just my way of sharing with you my perspective about some of the nuts and bolts of all this, some of how this is perpetuating this, how this cycle is perpetuating itself, how we are directly contributing to it, and why. And some of the things that everybody that hears my voice will likely have seen in life, their life, friends' lives, or whatever, where we're traumatizing our own, where we're damaging our own. And then, in many respects, sending them out into the world without even the tools to know how to defend themselves against the world and the way the world works. Although, obviously, you have to find your way. You, especially in today's world, you want to make sure your offspring's aware of how to deal with what's going on out there. That's a lot of work. I wonder why a lot of parents seem to fall short on that, which means their kids just essentially wind up being slaves, debt slaves, because, well, ignorance begets ignorance begets ignorance until somebody recognizes something and begins to break the cycle. And the way information spreads on a platform like YouTube, hearing simply a video like this could make somebody just start thinking in a different way. It could be the seed that begins a divergence in thinking or perception or awareness of the nature of what's actually going on. That's really the intention I have with this channel, is to tickle your critical thinker, to try to stimulate you to get out of the box if you have not, to get you to contemplate getting completely out of the box, stay out of the box, take a dump in the box so that you'll never get in, and then begin to ask bigger questions that, well, the questions they've asked you not to consider, the questions that taboos have told your mind not to go down the rabbit hole for. Do all the things to find the answers for yourself. Because nobody's going to hand you the truth. You're going to have to find it. You're going to have to wade through your own sea of shit to find it. You're going to have to go through your own experiences of what attaining the knowledge that it takes for you to figure it out is going to put you through. Knowledge comes with a price. There's always a price to bear for knowledge. That, my throat's getting dry. That price can be even something as what might be considered simple as, but it's not, it's big. Knowledge profoundly shifting your perspective. That can dramatically affect your life. Knowledge always comes with a price. And I don't think I knew that for a while. I know it, and I don't think there's too big a price to pay for knowledge, considering the price that we pay for ignorance. Think about that. There's definitely a price to pay for knowledge, but I don't think that price is anything in comparison to the price that human beings have paid for time immemorial for the ignorance that we so obliviously swim in.